Imagine a summer that never quite stops being summer, not the way you remember summer, summer as a hazard. Phoenix, Arizona hit 110 degrees or higher for 31 straight days in the summer of 2023, and then broke that record 2 years later. Southern Europe had summers where governments told outdoor workers by law to stop working during the hottest hours of the day. Parts of India and Pakistan hit temperatures the human body cannot survive for very long. Canada burned more forest in a single fire season than it had in any 5 previous seasons combined. Smoke from those fires drifted far enough south to turn the sky over New York yellow. None of that is a projection. None of it is a warning about a future your grandchildren might have to live through. That is the last few summers, in the world you already live in. This is the walk about what to do about it. If you missed the last 6 walks, my name is Scott. This is episode 7 of Philosophy Walking, the final walk of this series, and this is our 360-degree walk through Korça, Albania, where I escaped the 5th European heatwave of 2026 to cooler and higher climes. If you're new to 360 or the picture looks off, the description explains how to use it on each device. The YouTube app on your phone is best. The short version of the series so far. Competition is an engine. It has no conscience. When you point it at something you don't own, it will burn that thing down to hit its target. We've watched it aimed at nuclear weapons, at your paycheck, at your government, at the products you use every day. In the last walk, I told you the answer. It is the commons. The things we share, reason plus compassion, held in trust for each other and for whoever comes next. Today is the walk where I take that answer and hold it up against the largest live case any of us will see in our lifetimes. Because here is the truth about the commons. It doesn't stay abstract for long. Someone is always tearing off a piece and calling it theirs. And right now, the piece being torn off is the largest and most precious commons humans have ever depended on. The sky itself. The whole thin blue layer of atmosphere between us and dead space. The one commons no one gets to opt out of. The one commons that, if we lose it, ends the argument about all the others. Before we go further, let me state the science plainly, because the fog would rather I didn't. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is the international scientific body that has assessed climate research on behalf of nearly 200 nations since 1988. Its most recent full assessment, published in 2021, states the finding in the plainest language science permits. The exact wording is this: it is unequivocal that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, ocean, and land. Unequivocal is the strongest confidence level the IPCC uses. It is not hedging. It means the question inside the science is closed. The warming is happening. It is caused by us. Across published assessments of climate researchers, the scientific consensus is overwhelming. And the natural cycles that have always shaped the weather, El Niño, La Niña, ocean currents, jet stream shifts, those cycles are still running. They just now run on a warmer planet. That is why the last few El Niño years, according to NOAA and the World Meteorological Organization, have coincided with records for global temperature and marine heat, while human-caused warming has amplified many of the extremes that occur on top of natural cycles. The cycle did not stop. The cycle just now runs on a hotter baseline. Every degree of that baseline is ours. No amount of press conference fog changes that. Now, remember episode 5's playbook. Tobacco knew, sugar knew, opioid makers knew. Every one of them had internal research showing the harm. And every one of them ran a public campaign muddying the science while the private research kept confirming it. The oil industry ran that exact playbook on climate. In the 1970s and 1980s, ExxonMobil's own in-house scientists modeled the atmospheric warming that would follow from burning the fossil fuels the company was selling. This is not conspiracy theory. This is documented in a decade of investigative reporting. The Los Angeles Times, Inside Climate News, and later peer-reviewed studies by Harvard researchers Naomi Oreskes and Jeffrey Supran based on the company's own internal papers. Exxon's scientists produced remarkably accurate projections of future warming. The company had that knowledge internally. And while some of its scientists continued serious climate research, the company's public messaging increasingly emphasized uncertainty and doubt. funding think tanks, running ads, and putting executives on television saying the science isn't settled while its own internal work was showing that the science very much was. Same playbook, same denial, same lobbying, same attempt to make the cost of pollution somebody else's problem. Only this time the harm isn't a canal in Niagara Falls or a refinery in Bayway. This time the harm is the entire atmosphere and to all life on Earth. This is what an externality looks like when you make it planetary. The profit stays private, the cost goes into the commons, and because the commons belongs to everyone, eventually everyone gets the bill. And the results are here, not projected. Here, the American West has been on and off fire for a decade. Canadian smoke has blown far enough south to turn New York yellow. Greece and Italy watch their summers hit temperatures they have never seen. Southern Europe is running out of water. The American High Plains aquifer is running out of water. Fields are brown and parched and heated. Any farmer over 60 will tell you what they used to plant that they no longer can. Any firefighter will tell you what a fire season used to be and what it is now. And here's what the fog does not want you to know. The people can see it, and the people mostly agree. According to a 2025 survey by Eco-America, roughly 72% of Americans say they are concerned about climate change. That includes majorities of independents. That includes more than half of Republicans who don't identify with MAGA. According to Navigator research the same year, 70% of Americans call climate change a serious problem. According to Gallup, 62% say it is mainly caused by human activity. Majority say they have already been personally affected by extreme weather. Most Americans want their governments to do more. So what did the government do? According to public policy records and the administration's own announcements, this is what happened. In 2025, the Trump administration withdrew the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement for the second time in a decade. In early 2026, according to State Department filings, the United States pulled out of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and out of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the scientific body that has been assessing climate research for nearly 40 years. On February the 12th of 2026, according to the EPA's own press release, the agency revoked the endangerment finding, the 2009 scientific determination that greenhouse gases endanger human health, which is the legal basis for the federal government's ability to regulate them at all. At the announcement, the president called climate change a scam. The EPA administrator called it, in his own words, the most consequential day of deregulation in American history. In the March of 2025, according to the EPA's own count, the agency announced more than 30 separate deregulatory actions in a single afternoon. Vehicle emissions rules delayed by about 10 months, the equivalent, by the agency's own math, of adding roughly 25 million more gas-powered cars to American roads for that period. According to the EPA's revised cost-benefit methodology, health impacts of air pollution are no longer factored the way they were. If you don't count the tens of thousands of Americans who die each year from air pollution, a figure EPA analyses supporting prior rules had put well above 100,000. The math on rolling back the rules looks a lot better. The people looked at the smoke and the drought and said, "Do something." The government answered by making it easier to pollute. That is the largest and most current instance of every one of the four tells you learned in episode 4. The gap between what leaders say and what they do, talking about the working class while giving tax breaks to the industry that made the country flammable, the fog of PR speak, energy independence, reliable baseload, the American way of life, all decoded to mean the same thing: keep drilling. The manufactured enemy, the climate scientists, the electric vehicle mandate, the green agenda, China. Pick one, the fog is the same, and the media ecosystem I talked about in episode 4 carries it forward at maximum volume, with a whole industry of outlets whose job for 2 decades has been to keep the audience unsure whether it is even happening. And the pattern of who gets punished and who gets protected: subsidize the oil executives, punish the solar build-out, protect the shareholders whose portfolios go up when the atmosphere is monetized as a dumping ground. And there is a specific version of Tel 4 that turned out to matter for the biggest climate court case of our lifetime. When you're looking at who gets protected, add a question. Do the people in power personally profit from what's burning? Here is one of the clearest examples reporting has produced. According to a 2025 analysis published by The Guardian based on the judicial watchdog group Court Accountability's review of Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito's own financial disclosures, which are by law a matter of public record, Alito is the only sitting Supreme Court justice with direct investments in individual energy companies. According to Court Accountability's analysis, since he was appointed to the court in 2005, his oil and gas holdings have gained him somewhere between about $400,000 and $2.9 million. A large portion of that came from mineral rights on land in Oklahoma leased to an oil and gas company. According to the Supreme Court's own docket, this fall, in October of 2026, the court is scheduled to hear oral arguments in a case called Suncor v. Boulder. The petitioners are Suncor and ExxonMobil. The question is whether cities and counties can hold fossil fuel companies liable in state court for the local damages caused by climate change, the wildfires, the flooding, the extreme heat costs. Dozens of similar lawsuits are pending across the country from states and municipalities. The outcome will shape all of them. Here is what makes this case a tell running in daylight. According to court records, in 2023, the same case came before the court with the same parties and the same question. Alito recused himself. Without his vote, the cert petition failed. In February of 2026, the same case came back to the same court with the same parties and the same question. This time, according to the court's own order sheet, Justice Alito did not recuse. The court granted cert, which means he is on track to help decide whether the industry that has enriched him for 2 decades can be held accountable for the damage it did to the sky. The financial disclosures are public. The recusals are public. The docket is public. What that pattern means is a question reasonable people can debate, but the sequence itself is not in dispute. And it is why multiple watchdog groups, Senate committee members, and news outlets have called for his recusal and been ignored. And it is one person on one court. Multiply that pattern by the senators, representatives, regulators, appointed heads of federal agencies whose personal wealth is tied, directly or indirectly, through investments, through family, through the consulting jobs waiting for them after they leave office, to the fossil fuel industry, and you get a rough map of why the government answer to the smoke has been to make it easier to pollute. Follow the personal money, and the fog becomes a lot less mysterious. Now, the question the fog wants you to keep asking is, can we fix this without hurting people's quality of life? Can we do it without making things more expensive? That is the wrong question. The cost of not doing it is not zero. You are already paying for climate change. Every degree of warming already means bigger floods, longer droughts, higher food prices, higher insurance premiums, more people driven from their homes, more towns that do not recover. Every year of delay makes the eventual bill bigger. It shows up in your groceries, in your homeowner's insurance, in your kid's asthma inhaler, in the smoke that sits over the city for a week in August. The question was never cheap now versus expensive later. The question was always who pays? And the answer we have been given for 50 years is you. The right answer is not you. Because the companies that knew and denied and lobbied and profited, they made trillions of dollars off an atmosphere they knew they were breaking. That is not commerce. That is taking something that belonged to everyone and selling it back to us as gasoline. So instead of subsidizing them, we should be assessing them. Instead of taxpayers paying for climate damages while ExxonMobil pays dividends, ExxonMobil should be paying for climate damages while taxpayers get to keep their money. That is not a radical idea. It is the oldest idea in law. If you break it, you buy it. They broke the sky. They can help pay to fix it. And here is the thing almost nobody tells you plainly. If the world actually did this, coordinated at the scale of a wartime mobilization, funded largely by the industries that cause the harm rather than by public treasuries, we could still hold warming to something survivable. The IPCC's own math is public. According to its most recent assessment, to hold warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, the world needs to reach net zero carbon dioxide emissions by around 2050, with emissions cut roughly in half by 2030. To hold it to 2 degrees, the target moves out to around 2070. Every year of delay narrows those windows further, but nothing about them is beyond human reach. The technology exists, the models exist, the plans exist. Not undo the damage. That damage is done, but stop the worst version of the coming century from happening. That is what is still on the table. What is missing is the political will, and what the fog is for is making sure the will stays missing. Let me put some numbers on what we're already living through, most the conservative ones, the ones nobody in any camp seriously disputes. According to the World Health Organization, climate change is projected to cause approximately 250,000 additional deaths every year between 2030 and 2050 from malnutrition, extreme heat, and the spread of diseases into places they used to not reach. 250,000 additional deaths every year for decades. That is the WHO's low estimate. Many climate and public health researchers think the true number is already several times higher. According to the IPCC's most recent assessment, under high-emission scenarios, roughly 183 million more people face risk of hunger by 2050. Not projected to some distant future, those are people alive today. According to UN water scarcity already affects more than 2 billion people worldwide. Every additional degree of warming pushes hundreds of millions more into severe water stress. And it isn't only the places you would expect. It's California's Central Valley. It's parts of Southern Europe. It's agricultural belts on every continent. And according to the World Bank's 2021 Groundswell report, roughly 216 million people could be internal climate migrants by 2050 across just 6 major regions, driven from their homes by heat, drought, rising seas, and storms. Some other estimates put the true number closer to 1 billion. These are the low numbers. These are the numbers that survive being audited by economists who do not want to sound alarmist. And every year of delay makes every one of them bigger. Here is what I want you to hold on to before we walk further. Every problem we have looked at across this series matters. The wage collapse matters. The corrupt politician matters. The company poisoning the river matters. But every one of them assumes a livable planet as the backdrop for people to fight for. Climate change is the fight for the backdrop itself. There is no version of this where we save the workplace, save democracy, save the commons, but lose the atmosphere. If we lose the atmosphere, the rest stops mattering. This is the fight that determines whether the other fights get to continue at all. Nothing else in this series is more urgent than this. Nothing. So, what can you actually do about it? The tells are how you see this, but seeing isn't the same as acting, and I would be doing you a disservice if this walk ended without a few things worth doing with what we have walked through. 5 things. Write and call your representatives, not once, regularly. Ask where they stand on fossil fuel subsidies, on carbon pricing, on the endangerment finding revocation. Their offices count the calls. They count the emails. Politicians who never hear from voters vote as if voters don't care. Politicians who hear from voters every week vote differently. This is not naive advice. It is how legislation actually gets prioritized on the Hill, at your state capitol, at your city council. If nobody calls, nobody wins. Look at what your money is doing. Most people don't know that their retirement accounts, their pension funds, their savings, a lot of it is invested in fossil fuel companies. Log in, check. Many funds now offer fossil fuel-free alternatives at the same or similar returns. Moving your money doesn't destroy ExxonMobil. But the hundreds of billions of dollars in divestment commitments that institutional investors have made over the last decade genuinely move the industry's cost of capital. Every account that moves makes the next one easier. Vote for people who actually care about what we share, not who say they do, who show it in what they've voted for. Look at their record on air, on water, on wetlands, on forests, on public land. These are not decorative issues. Wetlands filter drinking water for tens of millions of people. Forests are half the world's carbon sink. Air is the first shared thing every child breathes. Water is the second. Every one of them is the commons. the thing everybody owns because nobody owns it. When a politician votes to weaken protection for any of them, they are voting to let someone privatize what belongs to everyone. That is the whole shape of this fight in miniature on a ballot near you every November. Lower your own carbon footprint where you can. Not because your individual footprint is what breaks the climate. It isn't. The largest emitters break the climate, and they have spent decades trying to make you feel personally responsible for their damage so you would stop looking at them. The concept of a personal carbon footprint was actually popularized in the early 2000s by fossil fuel advertising for exactly this purpose: to shift the moral load from the industry to the individual, so lower yours anyway, because it saves you money on energy, because it reduces the air pollution near where you live, because it makes you a walking demonstration that alternatives work, not because it lets the industry off the hook. It doesn't. Support taxing the emitters who aren't lowering theirs, because they should. The billionaire whose private jet burns more carbon in a week than most people burn in a year is not a job creator. He is a person consuming the shared atmosphere at industrial scale, and the price of that consumption should be paid by him, not by the truck driver in Ohio whose insurance keeps going up because the storms keep getting worse. A carbon tax, a wealth tax on the largest fortunes, a windfall tax on the fossil fuel industry, whatever the specific policy, the principle is the same. The people who did the most damage and who profited most from the damage should pay the most to fix it. That is not radical. That is the oldest principle of a fair society. None of these are glamorous. All of them work when enough people do them. And once enough people are doing them, the fog starts to lift. I told you at the end of the last walk that I have been writing a document, The Social Contract of the Commons. In the last walk, I called it the framework. Today, at the end of this walk, at the end of this series, I want to call it what it actually is. A covenant. A binding of the self to a shared understanding of what a fair, free, and shared future would look like, and what we owe each other in the future to get there. It has 13 duties. I named a few of them in the last walk. Here is the one that matters most for today. Article 6. The commons is planetary, intergenerational, and sacred. The actions of the present must always be weighed by their impact on what comes next. We owe a sacred debt to the future, to leave it not in ruin, but in renewal. That is what climate change is a test of, not our science, not our economics, not our politics, our covenant. If you agree with any of this, read The Social Contract of the Commons in full. It's linked in the description. Read it, argue with it, see if the duties feel right to you, sign on to it in your own life if they do. Because that document is not a contract of convenience. It is a covenant of conscience. We are each other's keepers, and we are the stewards of the world we share. So let the commons rise, in thought, in courage, in duty, in love, signed not in ink but in action. One more thing before I go. I'm working on something I'm calling the Constitution of the Commons. The next step past the social contract, a proposed framework for what a state actually built to serve the commons would look like. It's early. I want your reactions before I finalize it. Read what I have so far, linked in the description, and tell me what I'm missing in the comments. If you want more philosophy walking, more history, more contemplation from a polymath who loves the road, you know where to find me here on Renaissance Spirit.
We the many rise as one, bound by fire beneath one sun, not by chains, but by shared grace. This is the sacred commonplace.
Not mine, not yours, it's all we keep. The river deep, the mountain steep.
A trust we hold with sacred flame. The commons calls us each by name. We were made for more than but we're making more. What is the common? All that share truth and justice, land and air. What do we hold? A sacred trust to God to give because we must. Virtue lived a life well lived. Give what the common heart will give. Do good in all things, great and small. Stand with the many. Care for all. Liberty is not retreat, but rising strong with steady feet. Democracy, a sacred fire, born of duty, shaped by choir.
We do not only hold in trust for those to come, for all that's just. Each act must ask, does this serve right? The common shines its sacred light.
Who holds the right?
Each one the same.
In dignity, in voice, in name, and what's our charge? To serve with grace, to lift the whole, to guard this place.
Duty sacred carved in flame. Reason, justice, voice and name. Compassion holds what power brings.
The commons builds what conscience makes.
Not for conquest, never change. Power must be clear, humane. We rise not to rule, but men to serve the commons to the end. Virtue lived, a life well lived. Give what the calming heart will give. Do good in all things, great and small.
Stand with the many. Care for all. What shall we fight?
Injustice blind.
Systems cruel and power unkind. What shall we build? Our world made whole with civic hearts and sacred soul.
Not in ink is this declared.
But in every life that's shared,
Virtue lived, a life well lived.
the commons call.
Rise, forgive.
So let the commons rise
In every friend.
again. With one voice we claim the right to live in truth, to stand in love.
In every man.
To live in truth, to stand in love.